All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Simply Trade podcast news roundup. And I have a very special guest, and I'm so excited for him to be here. His name is Hugo Pakula. He's I hope I pronounced that right. Pakula?
You did. Pakula,
okay, yeah. Pakula, CEO of Tru Identity and really an expert on trade and I would say technology mostly because he's a CEO of Tru Identity, which is a supply chain compliance on cruise control. Is that what you call it? So it helps your supply chain, right? You can kind of talk about this a little bit more so I don't butcher it here. But thank you so much for being here. I met you finally at NCBFA and it was an instant click, I would say. So I'm happy to talk to you. Okay, so tell us what you do just so we get an intel on what's happening.
For sure. Nice to be here, Annik, and it was good to meet you last week, finally. Tru is a automated compliance program company. I think people always go, what the heck does that mean? So we make it really easy to import to not only the US, but globally. We give everything in plain English, which makes me the plain English guy. I think people get really confused and in the weeds on stuff sometimes. Yeah, that's right. It'd be nice if people were just being straight up about what you had to do. So
yeah. Right? In life, particularly in life, always, I think. I'm like, give it to me in simple. What do I have to do? And I think right now in the trade industry, that's probably more importantly because there's a lot going on. And I feel that's what we're doing, telling our friends, telling it in plain simple, because when we go to these conferences or whatever, we get it in hard English, not simple English. So when we go back to our friends and they start talking about tariffs, because that's what everyone is talking about right now. So we're finally, being relevant. You have to give it to them in plain simple because they're not going to take all the crazy wording and, IEPA and whatever there is. They're not going to understand that much. But we have lots to talk about. So this week, again, we went to NCBFA, but clearly we are also giving you news. So there's been loads of updates this week, such as the tariffs being adjusted to mainly all countries except China. So China is increasing, I think, by the minute, we would say. And all other countries are set at 10%, which is funny because we did get some countries that retaliated and wanted to put retaliation tariffs on, such as Europe came back with 20%, I believe. And they scrapped that because the United States scrapped theirs as well, right? So we're kind of on an even board, even though we're still putting 10% tariffs on everyone. So that's huge news.
Yeah, well, Annik, I don't proclaim to know what's going on in Trump's head, but there's an argument that this 10% baseline tariff was kind of the idea to begin with, was that we were going to sort of end up here. Now, China, of course, is known to be fairly as an exception, an outlier. I was going to say a violator, but let's say an outlier. In that they were probably going to be treated slightly differently. And I guess we've seen that play out. So 10% across the board. Now people are saying it's a sigh of relief.
Yeah, right. Now it's like, whoa, we're good. We can do this, right? Though, we'll get to that later, but it seems there's already some damage that has been done, right? Because those reciprocal tariffs that we have seen, like the 39, 34, 45, those had already been put into place, right? So businesses were already paying them. But let's kind of reel it back a little, because we started this week being kind of on edge, knowing that these tariffs were going to come. We didn't know whatever happened just right now. But in the beginning of the week, we were hard set. Trade was kind of falling apart in a sense, and brokers were scrambling to do their thing. And luckily, we went to the NCBFA conference where there was all brokers. So they had a lot to say. What have you been hearing at the conference, with industry leaders? I know you got to speak to loads of them. What are they saying, especially business owners as you are? So how does that affect you guys?
Well, I think the challenge has been, certainly for a lot of brokers, has been how do you handhold importers through this? Because we give guidance and then they start planning based on the guidance. And then within a day or 2 days, the guidance is wrong. So a lot of people are feeling this pain that not only that their business, their underlying business is changing, where it used to be about entries and getting it right and getting in the details. It seems now like we're doing sort of more consulting than we ever have. Not only for us as Tru Identity, but also brokers are spending a lot of time walking importers through the process rather than saying, okay, we know what your products are and we just need to do the entries. Tell us what you're importing and we'll get the entries done. It's a lot more strategic. And the problem with that is that the rules are changing literally all the time. So it's hard to do that strategy because you just keep having to have the same conversations with different information. And even worse is, I think the even harder thing at the moment is that these rules are changing so fast, customs can't keep up. So the way that you're even interacting with CBP now has completely changed. The way that you enter the data has completely changed. There's confusion. Audit readiness is changing. How do you make sure that you've got the right data in your entries as well as in your internal systems so that if you ever came under audit, you could say, well, I recognize that this entry line is different, is connected to this entry line, even though this one's for the aluminum portion of the product and this one's for the remainder of the product, and we've got separate tariffs and different 301 applies, doesn't apply. And so there's so many questions that are coming up because customs can't plan for this.
And you bring up a good point because, we talked about the RTs, the retaliatory tariffs, and we still have other tariffs going on. We still have the aluminum and steel, right? Because those are not scrapped. We still have the automotive. So while people are like, oh, see, we're good. We have 10%, we're good. I don't think they're acknowledging that we still have a whole set of tariffs, 2 sets. We have the aluminum and steel, and again, we have the automotive, and that's a very large part of what is being imported.
I think, Annik, what's crazy, and I was talking to people about this week, it's crazy to think that 301 is a relief now. Like that's it's a very cheap tariff. 125% on everything else is unbelievable. But, having a 20% or, these duties and tariffs is just so much better. Actually sounds like a relief.
Yeah. I mean, I find that a little crazy, but maybe that was the initiative, how you said to begin with, to kind of have that look like a relief. And again, it's so interesting because ahead of everyone that's reading the news currently is kind of not understanding the depth of it. I talk to a lot of regular people and I talk to a lot of trade people, and regular people are like, oh my God, see, the market's going up. It's getting better. Things are falling into place. We're good. But then I talk to trade people and they're like, again, yeah, we see a certain relief, but there's also, the game isn't over yet. We're still playing the game. We're still dealing with a lot of tariffs that still have not been figured out yet to the depth of it, I would say. And it's funny because the day off when these were announced, when this was all coming out that the tariffs are going to be paused for 90 days, P. Flores, the acting commissioner, was actually speaking at the NCBFA conference. And I did go very early morning. And, he wasn't speaking on a lot of things. I'm sure he can't really personally put his opinions out there and stuff. But he was acknowledging that there needs to be more community-based work, such as brokers and CBP need to work together to make things happen. And he was talking about security a lot. So to secure supply chains and to make sure that we're following the rules. And the funny thing is, he said things are changing rapidly, not knowing, or I don't know if he knew or not, but that things are about to change drastically just a few hours after. So I wonder, that's just kind of crazy to me. But the good thing is that, CBP is making such a large effort to speak to brokers. And also, I mean, you had the chance, I don't know if you were able to go, but businesses had the ability to go to these things. Okay. I want to move on to, what do I want to move on to? Okay. Have you, so now that the tariffs have changed, have you talked to anyone in the industry now that they have been changed, that they have been reduced, the tariffs, and what kind of have they been saying?
Yeah, I speak to people every single day. I think there's like the high level. There's my high level point here, which is that I think for people in the trade, we're learning as of the last whatever it is, 80 days or something, that instead of listening to the daily conversation, we pretty much just need to be listening to the executive orders and Federal Register notices. There's a lot of talk every single day about change. There's a lot of prospective change, but you can't really plan on the prospective change. It'll get announced and then not even happen. So planning based on it's really not ideal. I mean, I know that waiting, completely just ignoring everything is not really the solution either. But I think there are a lot of people who are sort of recognizing that a lot of these changes happen and then within 2 days get undone, or that they get implemented and then we do new change. We do something else now, not undone, but there's another change, another layer on top, and it's more like just acting based on today. So having the systems ready, being ready to act based on whatever there is today is really the goal, more than it is to really do a deep dive strategic anything based on announcements, whether it's on X or on Truth Social or anywhere else. Now, I've got my notifications on. I know I get told when he posts on Truth Social just to know because these things matter and our clients need to know what's going on. But I think for the people for importers, we really just need to deal with this sort of in some ways day by day, right? What is the rate if we imported today or our goods leave? What are we going to be assessed? We see stories like Apple moving, 5 plane loads of phones across the border.
Thank you for bringing that up. I was going to ask you about that. So China's relationship is different than the rest of the world. So we're kind of seeing a large reaction of some businesses, Apple per se. Yeah, I don't know, but they can't do that for a while. I mean, it's going to be in effect. So.
Seen too. I saw a great story yesterday. Reuters wrote about China. The CCP is advising Shein against moving away from China. Right, is getting involved in the discussion and saying to Chinese companies, "Don't leave China." Directly, it's like I don't know if that's who knows what that is, a threat or a suggestion, but they're saying directly to Chinese companies, "Don't leave China." And we're going to see, I think, some interesting dynamics play out here with Chinese companies for sure. I don't know how Apple reacts to that, right? Apple doesn't have a choice. It's such complicated supply chains. And that's why I think when we look at what's interesting, when we look at the stock market, Apple was affected heavily because they do have such complicated supply chains. They can't move quickly. They can't make a change in a week, a month. Even a year is a challenge. They can do it, but it's a real challenge.
That's something to think about, and that ultimately will affect consumers. I think, the company will be fine. They have billions probably of money. They're fine.
And they've been planning for this for years. This is not a surprise to anybody in the industry. None of this is really a surprise. This is exactly what we sort of expected to happen. I mean, not only just the general rule that if we look at a 10-year period, we're seeing more regulation, more scrutiny, and more data requirements, right? At the very least, we're seeing that. But then there's knowing that whether it's Trump or someone else, the trade protectionism is sort of the swing of the pendulum, and that's where we're going. People have been preparing this certainly around de minimis and e-commerce, but also
that's off the table right now, right? May, I think. May 5th.
So it is off the table for China in May. Then again, who knows? This could go into effect, and the same thing that happened in February, which is that they realized that there's no way to enforce it. Now, I know that they've declared that they have a way to enforce it, but no one's really heard anything about any new systems or process or anything. I'm not sure how that's going to play out. So we could see the exact same thing that happened last time. There's goods piling up at the border, no way to screen these imports, and equally violative imports coming to the country. Brokers are doing their best.
Yeah. And you know what? It's funny because I talked to a lot of brokers and or people that were not brokers, and they're like, oh, I don't want to be a broker right now. Like, I feel bad for these people because they're suffering. Like, they're, these changes day by day, and there's entries being made. So one day you pay the tariffs, the next day you don't. Like, how does that go on the statement? Like, how do you make sure you're being compliant, you're paying your tariffs correctly? Like, that's a mess. And then for each company is different because one maybe has steel and aluminum, the other one does. I mean, that's where AI kind of comes in, I would say. But also that means AI has to develop with the certain changes that are being made in the industry. They kind of have to reflect AI in a sense. I that's what I think.
I think it's idealistic, Annik. It's very idealistic to think AI is getting all of this and doing it all for everybody. There are a lot of people who use AI in their workflow, but I think a lot of it's earlier in the process than the filing, right? Than the entry, which is that you need to know your strategy. You need to know that you've got everything you need, that if you're going to switch between type 86 and type 01 or type 11, that you've got everything you need to be able to do that. You need to recognize that even bigger than doing the import is this discussion. I mean, we were just at NCBFAA. All the experts, I mean, I don't say the world experts, but all of the American import experts are there. And even there, they talk about, we're not exactly sure always what's legal right now. Right? I get asked about this new model. What I think people are talking about right now is the B2B2C model. That's a big deal. There's questions of its legality, and I think it does work. There are arguments for and against, which scares me. But I think that it does fundamentally work, and everybody's trying to get away from in e-commerce, right? This is a big e-commerce discussion. Is how do we not pay the duties on the retail cost? Because that's the pain. That's like the biggest pain.
Well, then, yes, exactly. And then I talked to one broker and he said, everyone thinks we're drowning in work, but also businesses can't even operate right now. Some of them, they can't pay, so they don't even need us. They can't even process anything. They can't pay the tariffs. Like, we're talking about these numbers as if they're just numbers, but businesses actually have to pay these certain, like these percentages. So like, imagine you're importing currently from China. Like, how are you going to do it?
Some brands I speak to, they've actually turned off their checkout. They've just said, you know what? If you're buying in the US, we're not sending. We just rather not risk, because between the time we make the sale and the time you import it, the cost could change completely, and we may not be able to get the entry done or get it on the ship before these go into effect.
Yeah, and then there's the question of, enforcing. So that's what the CBP commissioner said. We need to enforce, brokers need to enforce, CBP needs to enforce. But I just want to know, do they know exactly what to enforce? Like, it's going so fast that where is the line? Like, is everything being treated exactly the same? Do all people have the same knowledge of things? Are we all on the same page? Like, I don't see them, and like, I don't know how that would work exactly.
Yeah, well, I can tell you two funny things here. One is I had a conversation the first time around when de minimis was shut off in February. I had a conversation with a broker who was importing, and they were moving these goods into a different port. Sorry, not when it was shut off. This is prior. Sorry. There was a guy talking to a broker who was importing to a port in Florida, and he was importing a batch of Type 86 entries. And the officer said, Type 86, that's not an entry type. They went, what are you talking about? Of course it is. Here you go. Here are the regs. Like, I don't even know what to so you're right. I mean, there's a training gap, I think, for sure. And then separately, does customs know what to enforce? I think the answer here is, and we've seen this again and again now because the rules keep changing, it seems as though customs are finding out the rules at the exact same time as the industry, right? They only know that something truly goes into effect when there's an executive order or a Federal Register notice that forces them or instructs them to do something. So until they actually receive the official notice, they technically shouldn't be dealing with anything either. Now, they are always coding their system every day. I know that they're making changes. I know they're trying to predict, but really they're not in the loop. They're an enforcement agency. Their job is to enforce whatever is it's essentially what's in the Federal Register notice, not even in an executive order. And then we see this May deadline coming up for de minimis, and we don't even have the Federal Register notice. So there are questions. I mean, I have huge ones about China origin items in de minimis that we won't know until we get that Federal Register notice. They might have even, by closing off a loophole, created a new loophole.
Yeah, and that's the problem. How can businesses can't really prepare if they don't know like the ins and outs of things, like the regulations. What can we get away with? What can't we? And I did hear that there is some businesses that try to get away with, they try to go around these tariffs, right? Especially with the aluminum and steel. I think valuation is a big part of it, or I that's what I hear, or like that's what I seem to understand. So have you heard of any of that, like getting around the tariffs and not paying them? And I'm not trying to get anyone in trouble here. I'm not sure how it works, but have you heard anything on that, like getting around the tariffs for some businesses?
Look, so yeah, well, whenever there's a rule, someone will try and circumvent a rule. So there's that. I think there's an argument to be said that that customs doesn't have the tools or resources at the moment to really look for violators. But you got to remember, you keep your records for years.
5 years, right? Or is it 5 years? Okay. Yeah.
5 to 7. It depends on the rule.
Okay.
And that you breaking I would never advocate for breaking the rules. There's no way that it makes any sense. But there are definitely people who are doing some sketchy, if not sketchy things, then pretty blatantly illegal things. I hear it at events. People suggest this ability. A lot of this talks about e-commerce because it's an odd environment, right? It's over 90% of the volume into the United States. And yet they still treat it like an exception. Right, but it's 90% of the volume, and this idea that you could somehow use the COGS value without a first sale rule. There's very few loopholes, right? It's not designed to have loopholes. That's not the point.
And it seems they will come after you later because they are going to get better. CBP is going to get better and they are going to get after this. And then, once the time comes when they finally have a system, and I'm sure they're working through that right now, businesses will be, as I don't know if I can say that on here, sorry, will be not happy. Well, unfortunately, not be happy. And then, sorry, I just want to touch on the automotive industry real quick. We have a 25% tariffs on auto parts. That is huge, and it's in effect right now. I understand it's not withdrawn, correct?
No, not that I know of.
Okay. Yes. Not that I know of either. And I think I'm looking at an article where it says that a study finds, this is on Reuters, study finds Trump's 25% auto tariffs could cost U.S. automakers $108 billion. I wonder where that money goes, where that money comes from.
Someone's paying
and
it.
I know exactly where it's coming from, actually. But, it's coming from us. And so probably not the best time to buy your car sooner or later.
Well, you could argue just like Apple brought in tons of phones because it's the lowest it's going to be for a while. There is an argument it's the exact time to buy a car, but I haven't looked at car prices in a while. As in, buy now or forever hold your peace, that kind of thing.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is a crazy situation. And, kind of rounding this up, I love to have different stories on the podcast. Like tariffs have been a topic of discussion for a while. And it seems like I'm always looking for new things. But then the only thing that there's currently some that like to talk about is tariffs. And then we have AI. Of course, I'd love to talk to AI and the development of it. And we have our last episode, or second to last, is actually with Hall. I don't know if you know him. He's on the AI developments and stuff. And I think, and you can talk a little bit about this, is that AI is a helpful tool through this difficult era, right? It could make things a little more simplistic. Do you think, or no? I just want to give people hope somehow.
Look, obviously AI is really useful. I think the challenge is we just say AI and people go, right, but which tool am I using? What do you want me to use? AI. I mean, using ChatGPT to navigate tariffs is probably not going to help you very much. But potentially, I mean, you could come up with some. I'm sure there's a way. I'm sure somebody's found a way. I think the hope in this is that, we have essentially the same foundations apply, right? While the today thing has changed, and actually they said this, Customs said this in some of their talks this week, brokers just need to keep doing what brokers do best. They know the rules and we just need to follow them. So as much as there's change every day and the tariff rates, right, from an industry perspective or from a broker and forwarder perspective, we're doing the same thing every day, right? We're just continuing to make entries as much as it's a little confusing or a little slower because we have to think about the latest rules. It is the same fundamental work. We still got to get this stuff done, right? The volume hasn't changed that significantly yet. And also, we've seen
Do you see that to change? Do you see that to change?
Well, we've seen a clawback of the seriously high reciprocal tariffs for the next 90 days. 90 days is enough time for people to try and make some decisions, maybe bring in some imports. I have a feeling that's also part of the strategy is, well, maybe new reciprocal tariffs are going to come back in. So bring in goods right now and like trying to drive US trade. But I'm not sure exactly how this leads to US jobs if inputs, like you said, especially in car parts or really anywhere, if inputs are so expensive, it's not like you're going to manufacture it here. The labor cost is high. So you're not going to bring inputs to the United States, let alone finished goods. It's crazy.
I know, but apparently that's what we want. We want to create jobs. And unfortunately, I don't know how a $3,000 iPhone will help anyone. Because if Apple comes here, I want that to be true too. Like, I think creating jobs sounds amazing. I just think the logistics of it, and I only think this way because I'm in trade, because, from an outsider, it's different. Like, you might look at it like, yeah, we should create jobs here. We should do all this. But then when you look at the trade industry and how things are how people are scrambling behind the scenes and how the up and down is just, it's just like hard on the industry and the decision making and stuff. I just don't see right now the light at the end of the tunnel, even though I'm very positive every day. Like I want everyone to be happy and successful and get through this time, in a healthy way. But I just don't see the light because we've seen so many changes. I just don't know when it'll stop. And you know what? That's the fun part, because that's why I'm here and we can talk on this. Otherwise it'd be a little boring.
Yeah, well, exactly. It would be a little bit. Yeah. No, there's always something to talk about. There's just a lot of news right now. I was going to say another thing that's kind of scary is this idea. Have you seen the Ships Act? The U.S. government only uses U.S. Flagged ships, U.S. flagged vessels, and that we have to manufacture a certain. I mean, to be able to do that, I think we're at something. I heard someone say we're at somewhere at 20% capacity, and you go, well, that's scary. We're nowhere close to the need. I mean, nowhere close. To manufacture those ships, it takes years to get anything. To get a ship out, it takes a long time.
I think I saw news that he wants to buy some, right, from another country, and he is asking Congress.
To be U.S. flagged, there are certain rules about U.S. content, about how it's made, about where it's made. I mean, I recognize they're just trying to say not China made, but it's something like the bulk of ships are made in China. So how would you like to do all of this? Not only that, but all the staffing. They have to be staffed by a certain number of American people. It's just the needs for the next few years are going to change. Maybe this will create jobs, but I don't know how you achieve. I have a feeling that one's going to get stuck because it's just hard to even meet the requirements.
I think I did see that in the news, but it's just in the beginning stages, right? Trump. I mean, I think Trump is like he has a lot on his table right now with the tariffs being, and then there's the TikTok situation. I hate bringing this up, but it's a big thing that you can put TikTok and tariffs now in the same sentence because they kind of align right now.
There's a lot of anti-China sentiment going on, right? And that China's been taking advantage. And there's actually a great article which talks about, it's one of my favorites. I might even send the link over so you can include it somewhere.
Please do. Maybe I can include it. Yes.
It's called Manufacturing is a War Now. And the idea being that manufacturing used to be about job creation, right? It was about trade, but really manufacturing now is a national security issue. Right? If we are so dependent on China, it is a national security. So I actually understand that. I think I battled with that for a while, but I think it makes sense. But we've already given them the capability, right? They are so advanced. And people misunderstand that China is not only a cost opportunity. Yes, it can be cheaper, but they have supply chains that are designed in such a way that you can create specialty products that there are lots of issues. Forced labor is an issue too.
Yes, yeah.
No, you're fine. But you can do some incredible things in China because they've developed the capability over the last 20, 30, 40 years. And that's why China is this superpower for manufacturing. It's not because it's just cheap. Now, that's a reason. but it's that you can achieve things there that are hard to do elsewhere. And that's where people are saying, even with tariffs, you know what? Maybe we'll still make it in China. They're not even looking at moving. They're going, honestly, there are so many advantages of making there that even at 100% tariff, it's not enough. So I saw, Mr. Wonderful from Shark Tank, Kevin talked about, he said he's advocating for 400% tariffs. He said that's where it becomes a real challenge. Honestly, we could see it keep going. I don't understand this battle, reciprocal. I mean, if we're going to keep doing that, it is going to keep going up. We're at 125% now. That's unheard of. I mean, at least since Smoot-Hawley, right, from years and years ago.
Quick personal question. Do you think America is suffering more from the tariffs, or do you think China is suffering more?
That feels not fair. I don't know that there's an answer yet, is my honest answer. I don't think we've really seen the suffering. It takes a few weeks. I was talking with a friend who's in investments and sort of in the finance space, and he's saying, we won't see the effects of this and cash flow on businesses for at least 60 to 90 days, right? We're not going to see the actual implication of this. There's a delay. And so I think we don't know. I think the market gets spooked as soon as there's a rule change. They get spooked. But the real effects on someone's cash flow is at least 2 to 3 months out. And so I think we're going to continue to see escalation of new rules. We're going to continue to see more changes. We're going to continue to see things be implemented and then be pulled back, whether that's as a strategy to create some kind of reliance on Donald Trump or on the U.S., whether that's to emphasize power on the U.S., right, of the U.S. And then we're going to continue to see settling of those rules, I think, slightly after they get implemented.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, and we're in an interesting time, and I'm so glad to getting to talk to people like you who are qualified to talk on this, and just having a simplistic discussion. I think that helps to kind of understand the severity of this and kind of understand the whole, just where we are at, because we're in a weird, I don't know what we're in right now. It's like,
can I round it up from my side slightly?
Go, please.
I look at it like people need to be reading official sources. They need to be looking at the Federal Register notice and at the executive orders. They need to be waiting for agencies like Customs to put out the CSMS guidance. I put it in my when I go on vacation, my vacation responder has CSMS guidance, FRN, his links.
I saw that. So smart.
Please so smart. Just check official sources. There's so much noise. We need to cut through it. It's not working. We can't rely on the same things we did maybe even a year ago. We need to be looking at trusted partners. So talk to your broker, talk to your forwarder, get in the conversation. One of the biggest things is you can't rely only on third parties to handle this. You know your products the best. You know your customers the best. And so you need to be looking at it through your own lens. Everybody needs to take ownership of trade. Never before. It has literally never been more important to know your supply chain strategy and to know your product metadata. It is so, I can't impart that enough. That's the answer here, is to look at official sources and to own it yourself, to own the process.
I love that. That's a good one. Yeah, education is important, and we see it. I think we see an increase in education recently, and I appreciate that from the industry, because I think that's the only way we get through this the safe way, and the way to not be fined millions of dollars within the next 5 years.
Ignorance is not helping you at all right now.
No.
Yeah, that's right.
Ever in life, you have to. I love, because I think when I talk about trade, like, it's also life lessons in a sense, like everything we're doing in trade, what we have to do, stay vigilant, stay educated, do the right thing and be proactive and, talk to the right people is something you also should be implementing in your life regardless. So it's just a reflection of what you should be doing anyways. So I want to thank you formally. Thank you so much, Hugo, for coming on. And I'm happy to talk to you. And I can't wait to see you again. I'm not sure when that will be in person. I wish you the best of luck with Tru Identity. Can't wait to see what's coming out of this. So thank you again for coming on, and I'll talk to you soon. And to our listeners, thank you so much for listening. I hope this conversation was a little bit of enlightening and kind of talking through what's going on, what's been going on this week, because I think that's what the industry was talking about. These are the kind of the topics, and So yeah, we'll see you next week. I'm not sure what we'll be talking about. I'm not sure if there'll be a change by the time you hear this. It might be reversed totally. So I'm sorry, that's not on me. But thank you so much for listening, and see you next week.
Thank you very much for joining us. Simply Trade is brought to you by the generous contributions of Global Training Center. You can follow the show and GTC on LinkedIn or Twitter and other social networks. Make sure you check out the show notes in the description for a full rundown of today's show with all the important links. Also, make sure that you share this with a friend and subscribe on your favorite streaming platform. We really like hearing from you. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to rate and review wherever you listen to this podcast. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest in the show or would like to sponsor Simply Trade or suggest any topic you would like for us to discuss, please contact us via email at simplytrade@globaltrainingcenter.com, or you can DM us on Twitter at simplytradepod. Thank you again for the privilege of your time. Happy trading. Simply Trade is not a law firm or an advisor. The topics and discussions conducted by Simply Trade hosts and guests should not be considered and is not intended to substitute legal advice. You should seek appropriate counsel for your own situations. These conversations and information are directed towards listeners in the United States for informational, educational, and entertainment purposes only and should not be substituted for legal advice. No listener or viewer of this podcast should act or refrain from acting on the basis of information on this podcast without first seeking legal advice from counsel. Information on this podcast may not be up to date depending on the time of publishing and the time of viewership. The content of this posting is provided as is. No representations are made that the content is error-free. The views expressed in or through this podcast are those of the individual speakers, not those of their respective employers or Global Training Center as a whole. All liability with respect to actions taken or not taken based on the contents of this podcast are hereby expressly disclaimed.